Good Sunday morning. My name is Jaden Jefferson, and welcome to this week's Community Focus. Inflation is something that we're all dealing with now, whether at the pump, in the grocery store, in our everyday lives. So joining me this morning to talk about inflation and offer an expert perspective is Dr. Kevin Egan, professor of economics at the University of Toledo. Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Of course. So give me an idea of why we're seeing inflation, because there seems to be a lot of confusion about why this is happening in the first place.
We haven't. Our central bank has a dual mandate of full employment and has an inflation target of 2%. And since the 80s, it's always been about keeping us at full employment. Inflation hasn't been an issue for 50 years, and so this is the first time many of us are experiencing it. And so it's primarily the impact of the pandemic, and also. The pandemic was a really weird recession. It happened quickly, and many people were severely impacted, especially if you were in the services and you lost your job. But there are also many people like myself as a professor. My classes moved online, but my salary stayed the same, and many people had office jobs that their pay stayed the same. So we actually had increased savings where I canceled a vacation, I wasn't going out to eat. And so, but my pay was the same. So we had increase in savings. And now as we're coming out of the pandemic, aggregate demand for the economy has increased as many citizens have chosen, we have a good job market. The unemployment rate is low. People are optimistic, want to spend now some of that extra savings they had from the pandemic. And we had generous fiscal stimulus during that time. And so that also increased savings. And so people are now spending that down. So aggregate demand has gone up. But we still have supply chain disruptions because of the pandemic, and so aggregate supply has had a hard time keeping up. And so just basic macroeconomics is when you have increased aggregate demand in our economy, and aggregate supply is struggling to keep up, then that puts upward pressure on prices, and we see inflation.
And the thing about inflation is that it seems to never be stopping. It just seems to get worse and worse. So could we see the situation get better, or is this going to continue?
So it's important to note that inflation is a rate. So the inflation rate got as high as 6 to 8%. And so, that means prices are 6 to 8% higher this year than last year. And so it is expected that is going to come down, that in this next year, the rate of increases will be lower, maybe 4 to 5%. But yes, an inflation rate of 4 to 5% is still prices increasing above where the target is. Our central bank would like it to be around 2%, so it still is higher. And so the central bank, they increase interest rates, and that's the interest rate they control, and that affects mortgage rates and a rate you would pay to get a car loan. And so they're doing that to purposefully decrease spending and decrease aggregate demand, so to just keep aggregate spending in line with what we can produce. And that is expected to bring the inflation rate down. What is important is, as long as everybody expects inflation to be temporary, it will be temporary. The central bank will raise rates and they'll rein it in. However, and so that's what economists really look at carefully, is looking out 5 years, 10 years into the future. If it starts getting built into what people expect, then once it can be a self-fulfilling prophecy where I demand a 5% wage increase because prices are going to go up 5%, and firms just expect they're going to increase prices 5%. And as of now, that is not. It is expectations into the future are that it is going to come down. It does still seem to be temporary, but that's what the central bank really has to keep an eye on, and just make sure that it's a temporary thing and we get back to low stable inflation of 2 or so percent.
And sometimes inflation can be a good thing. It can be a good thing in some cases, but right now it's really, taking a hit on a lot of our wallets. So what can be the benefits of inflation in some cases?
Yes. So first of all, the hit on your wallet part. I was just checking. The real thing is what we look at is real wages. So right, if you get a 5% pay raise and inflation is 3%, you got a real increase of 2%, right? You got a pay raise more than what prices went up on average. And so the concern is right now is that pay raises are increasing, especially on the lower scale. and that's good, but they're not increasing as fast as inflation is increasing. And so that's the real concern, is that real wages are now actually decreasing. And how inflation can be good is it does benefit borrowers and hurts savers. And so if you were, got a home, right before the pandemic and locked in a 4% home mortgage rate for 30 years, you're going to benefit from that for 30 years as a borrower. And if you took out any loan, there's current conversation about student loans. Student inflation helps anybody who's a borrower. The real dollars you pay back end up being less, and it hurts savers. And so, especially if it's unexpected inflation like we're having now. But mostly for markets to work well, we do want certainty about what prices are going to be in the future. And so it's best to have some, low, stable inflation that we all can expect and count on and get back to that world.
We've seen kind of the biggest impacts at the grocery store getting gas when it comes to inflation this year. So what do you think next year could look like as far as inflation goes?
There's no crystal ball. It is, high gasoline prices really impact the average citizen, especially on the lower income scale, because generally we are a car-centered society and you got to drive, you got to have your car. And so, the last time we had really high gas prices was back in 2008, and we were in the Great Recession then. So that was doubly harmful, as we had a poor labor market and high gas prices. So we have very high gas prices now, but at least we have a healthy labor market with a very low unemployment rate. People generally can find a job and work. And of course, no one likes to pay high gas prices. That is dollars you have less than to spend on other things. And so that just follows what the global price of a barrel of oil is right now. It's very high at 120, used to be 60. Aggregate demand, again, has increased a lot. And during the pandemic, price of a barrel of oil plummeted. And so the global production cut back. And then now aggregate demand has increased dramatically again as we come out of the pandemic. People are taking vacations and driving. And aggregate supply just hasn't kept up, and so that's the price of a barrel of oil has shot up. And at some point, those prices will come down, but I would not make any predictions on when that can happen. There are uncertain things that happen constantly. The war in Ukraine has impacted grain prices, has impacted oil prices, and so there's just always things that happen. Now, in terms of food prices, another issue is, so we sent these, we did a good fiscal stimulus. I view it as disaster relief to get us out of to help citizens in the pandemic. And, we sent stimulus checks to everyone and extra unemployment benefits. And now as we come out of the pandemic, again, that helped with savings and people are spending more. But what's troubling to me is, again, I want to see that in a robust, healthy labor market, the average worker is coming out ahead, and they're not. And that inflation is reducing real wages. And so my point here is going to be that it's just, I view it as a balance of power issue. And the average worker just doesn't have enough. And you keep trying to, even when we try to help them, it's like this, I view it as like this negotiating table where the firms are down here and the workers are up here, and no matter where you put money in, it just keeps sliding down like water down a hill into the firm's pocket and not into the average worker's pocket. And so we do have many industries that are very concentrated. If you look at like meat, there are 4 major meat producers. They have incredible market power on their end, and they're primarily increasing prices because they can. Because we are in a market where there's extra demand. The average consumer is less careful about, prices are just going up. We don't know. Gasoline prices are going up directly because oil is going up. That matches directly. But now chicken is going up, and going to a restaurant is going up just because they're paying their workers more. So sometimes input costs go up, and that does filter into the output prices as you would expect. But sometimes firms are just raising prices because they can, because they're in an inflationary environment where they can, because everybody else is raising prices, and they're just massively increasing their profits. And where do the profits go? Well, they go to the shareholders of these big firms. Who are the shareholders? The wealthiest 10% of households own 80% of all the stock, and it goes to the CEOs and upper management. And so it's helping. I want to see a strong labor market that helps decrease income inequality, and the environment we're in is not. You're seeing profit margins of big firms go up, real wages of the average worker are going down. It's like, so we just gotta balance out that negotiating table, and it is frustrating to me as an economist to see that we have a healthy labor market. We did monetary and fiscal stimulus to help us recover from this pandemic, but yet we're in a world where the people benefiting are the people who are already benefiting before. Shareholders, upper management of firms, they're raising prices. Average worker is, getting the short end of the stick again.
And that just seems to be America's economy in a nutshell. If you want just an honest recap of everything, that's pretty much what it is. And everything's connected too. There were definitely mistakes along the way. And now it's up to us to change some of these things, because truly, if we want a better society, we got to be willing to make those changes, because the workers deserve it, especially after these last couple of years we've had where it's just been chaos and confusion for everybody. And it still is the case today. Dr. Kevin Egan, Professor of Economics at the University of Toledo, thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. You have a great day.